Okay, for today, we're going to figure out if the Vikings are good or not. Like, here's some facts about the Vikings. They are a football team. Their mascot is a Viking. They're in Minnesota. Their quarterback is Kirk Cousins. And that's it. I don't know what else to say about the Vikings. They're a very confusing team. Right now they're 6-3, and it just seems like they don't have an identity. They can't win big games. They're right behind the division leader Green Bay, but yet they don't actually feel like an actual competitor. One moment Kirk Cousins being yelled at by one of his wide receivers, and then the next moment we're praising him. I don't know what to think about the Vikings. I really don't. I was actually trying to avoid this video as long as possible because I honestly can't. I don't know what the Vikings are. All those things I listed just now, that's all I know. Like if let's look at their record. Like, their 3 losses are to Green Bay, pretty good defense. Chicago, great defense. And Kansas City defense, it has been playing better. Next, they play against Cowboys, which they will lose because they are a above average team. Broncos, they will win. Then they got the Seahawks, which they're probably going to lose. Then they got the Lions, and then they got the Chargers, which they will win both of those games. Then they got Green Bay, which they're going to lose because they are not a great team. They don't play, like, they're really good at beating down not good teams. But as soon as they play someone actually competitive, they kind of fall apart. So I actually see them losing their last 2 games, Green Bay and Chicago. And if the Vikings are weirdly, like, they're 6-3 and right behind Green Bay, but it doesn't feel like it. It feels like they're right in the middle of the division when in actuality it's totally believable and possible that they overtake Green Bay as the division leader. I don't think it will happen, but it doesn't even feel like a possibility when it actually is. It's just their offense is weird because they are not consistent by any means of the imagination. One minute they look all put together, look like one of the best offenses in the NFL right now. The next minute they look not great, below average. Kirk Cousins can't hit a broadside of a pole barn, even if he was right next to it. But then the next week he looks like Peyton Manning. What? I don't know what else to say. Like, that is what the Vikings are. Like I was fearing this topic because I feel like I was waiting for it because I thought by now we would know what the Vikings are. It is week 10, and usually you can figure out what a team is. For example, Chicago, good roster, need a few more pieces, as in quarterback and wide receiver, and it would be a good team, but right now they're not good because their offense gets off the field too quickly or can't score points. If we look at the Lions, they are an average team with a terrible owner and an organization that can't put it together. Green Bay, a team that is the exact opposite, has put it together, is a good team and possible Super Bowl contender. The Vikings, I don't know how to sum them up. I really don't. Maybe a competitive wild card team. Like, they'll get the wild card spot, and whoever they face, they would be competitive against. I really don't know. It's really hard talking about the Vikings. And I don't see them. Like, they play Dallas next week, and my prediction for that game is going to be 24 to probably 14. Like, what happened to the Vikings? I remember 2 years ago when the Minnesota Miracle, like, they were almost to a Super Bowl. And now, like, we're talking about being in a competitive wild card spot. Like, man. And it's not like their team has changed a whole lot besides Kirk Cousins. So what does that tell you about Kirk Cousins? No matter what the numbers are. I don't know. I just feel like Kirk Cousins doesn't pass the smell test, I guess. Like, oh, you can look at all his stats, but once you see his play, he's not consistent. He turns over the ball way too much, and I don't know. Sometimes it seems like their team doesn't trust him as a passer, because I think it's the same. I think Minnesota's in the same bait as Chicago, just in a better situation, because Kirk Cousins is 100% better than Mitch Trubisky. Don't get me wrong. Like, Kirk Cousins would run the Bears offense a whole lot more than Trubisky. But I don't think he can carry a team, nor I think he's a quarterback that is as good as the rest of your roster is. Like, if you need him to elevate your team, he's not going to do that. But if you got a pretty good roster, he'll play right along with them. But I don't know what the Vikings do once they have to figure out if they're going to re-sign him or let him go into free agency. I really don't know. Like, where does he rank as a quarterback in the division? Okay, he's not as good as Rodgers. Obvious. There's very few quarterbacks in the league that are better than Rodgers. I can count them with one hand. He sometimes plays better than Matthew Stafford, but not often. Stafford, even though he's not completely consistent, he's more consistent than Kirk Cousins. He's definitely better than Trubisky. Like, at the beginning of the year, I wasn't sure, but after watching Trubisky this year, it's pretty obvious that he's better than Trubisky. At least he has an arm. Like that's the one thing with Kirk Cousins he definitely has, is he has absolute arm strength. Like, he can force the ball wherever he needs it to be. It's just, if he's making the right reads, everything has to do with what's up here and not what's up here, you know? Like, it's hard. It's hard to describe the Vikings. It really is. I couldn't even describe their offense. Like, they are a passing team sometimes, and they're a running team the next week. I really don't know. And some people would argue that's an advantage, but I really don't think it is, because when they're committed to one or the other, they're very committed. Like, if they can only pass the ball, that's the only thing they can do. If they can run the ball, that's the only thing they can do. And people describe Kirk Cousins as a great leader, but how can you be a great leader if he can't put a team on his back? A lot of people don't realize when it comes to leadership, yeah, having the attitude is important, and a lot of people lack that. But Kirk Cousins lacks the ability to make a mistake and then make up for it and show all his other teammates that we are back in this. Like, he doesn't win a lot of close games. They either blow him out or the Vikings either blow a team out or they lose horribly. Like, there's no real in between. Besides the Chiefs, they were actually competitive against the Chiefs. That game came down to the wire, and I was actually thoroughly surprised. That's the thing. Everything that I say about the Vikings, it seems like it's going to be proven wrong, give or take a couple, weeks. Like, I could say they are a Super Bowl contender, and they immediately lose like 3 games in a row. If I say they're a terrible team, they will win those 3 games in a row. Like, I don't know what to say, like, besides the obvious. What is interesting about the Vikings is that they have an easier schedule than I thought they were. Like, their first game was against the Falcons, and the Falcons, not a good team this year. A lot worse than I thought they would be, considering the roster. Green Bay, hard team. Raiders, harder than the people expected, but when they played them early on in the year, the Raiders didn't have anything figured out, so they beat them 34-14. Then they played Chicago, lost against Chicago 16-6. Their offense couldn't do anything against the Bears defense, which, most teams can't do much against the Bears defense, but if you want to be an elite team, you got to be able to at least play well, well enough to score at least a touchdown. They didn't even score a touchdown in that game. Like, you get against really good defenses, a good offense should score at least 21 points. Now, in that situation, at that point, it's up your defense to stop the other team to scoring less than 21. Then they play the Giants, which the Giants are a rebuilding team. They beat them 28-10. Like, what more you want me to say? Eagles are kind of the same situation. Like, I feel like the Eagles are good, but their record doesn't really show it. They sometimes look good, sometimes they lose against the Lions, which are not a great team. So I'd say that's an okay win for them. Then they won against the Lions 42-30, and that game was way too competitive for too long. That game was close really up to halfway through the fourth quarter. Then they played the Redskins, which they really should have blown them out. Like, the Redskins are a joke this year. They only won 19-9, 10-point difference. Like, yeah. What was your offense doing that couldn't move the ball down the field against the Redskins defense? Like, seriously. Then they lost against the Chiefs, which, even without Patrick Mahomes, Chiefs are actually a pretty good team. Like, as soon as Patrick Mahomes got hurt, everyone thought the Chiefs were done, but they actually been doing pretty well, surprisingly. Next week, they'll play the Cowboys, and I don't see them winning that game because they're a competitive team, and they just don't win against competitive teams like the Cowboys. Now, I don't think the Cowboys are the best division leader, but I don't see them pulling it off. Like, if the Cowboys turn the ball over too often, or if Dak Prescott fumbles the ball, which he has a weird tendency. He kind of reminds me of Tim Tebow in that way, where Tim Tebow had he would carry the ball well, but like he'll just fumble the ball randomly, which is weird because, Dak Prescott and Tim Tebow actually have like really strong arms. And by the way, when I say really strong arms, I mean they're physically strong. There's a difference between having a strong arm and having arm strength. What I mean by that is having a physical arm. Like, if a guy lifts, like if he benches 300 pounds. He's strong, but it doesn't mean he has a lot of arm strength. Otherwise, linebackers and offensive linemen would all play quarterback instead. Arm strength is how well you can fling the ball. Like, a lot of it's in wrist and how well you can push the ball through. I don't know how to really explain it. I imagine an actual quarterback could explain it better, but that's my understanding of it. But back to the Vikings schedule. The Broncos, they should win that game. Like, no doubt. Like, the Broncos defense has played terribly. They didn't get a sack until like week 3 or 4, which is weird because they got a lot of first round draft picks in that defense. But Broncos are terrible. Flacco's out. Locke is in. Locke is a rookie quarterback. Needs to still develop. Next they play the Seahawks, and they're just not going to win against the Seahawks. That's pretty safe bet. Seahawks has a way better offense, and their defense is about the same. So I don't see Kirk Cousins stepping up to the plate for that game. Then they play the Lions again, and they should beat the Lions. Like, I hate talking about the Lions. Oh god. Yeah, the Lions are not a good team, so actually, they're an average team, but they should still win that game. Then they play the Chargers, which is another like a disappointing team. Like, they have the same roster they had last year, but yet they played pretty terribly. And Rivers looks old, and he should probably retire pretty soon. Then they play the Green Bay Packers, which they'll get smeared. Like, it's their second time playing against them. I don't see them making any major improvements to be able to win that game. I think it might be... Like, the last time they played them, they lost 21-16. I actually see that getting worse, and they're losing to 30-14. But then finally they closed the season out with the Chicago Bears, and same story. They got too good of a defense, and Kirk Cousins doesn't seem to be able to step it up when facing a competitive defense. It kind of reminds me of the Pittsburgh Steelers last year, and even more so this year. They just can't win games that, like, they can beat on teams that are probably going to be over 500 or below, but when they have to face a Super Bowl competitive team like Green Bay or Dallas or Kansas City, or if they did face the Patriots, they couldn't win those games. I think no matter if they get a bye or they're the wild card or whatever, they're going to lose that game, because as soon as they play a competitive team, they're done. Well, this video is kind of going to be like, it's kind of a boring video, because the fact is that the Vikings are just not a great team, but they're not terrible. They're very middle of the road that can play great sometimes, but not against actual good teams. I don't know how to liven it up any more than that. Like, well, I think I want to end the video pretty soon, because there's not much more to talk about the Vikings. I got a new mic and a new camera, so we're getting a little more professional up in here. But yeah, going forward, I'm done with the North. I'm not going to go over every division like I thought I was going to. I think I'm going to, like, it's really hard to come up with topics with very specific teams. So going forward, I'm just going to talk about teams I want to talk about, or talk about news stories that I want to talk about, if that makes any sense. But see you next week, and I hope day brings you well.